Whether you're a fan of the game or not, I think we can all agree that the legacy of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim will be a long-lasting positive one. From the arrow to the knee memes of 2012, to being ported to every possible console ever, the game still holds a special place in many of our hearts, including my own. Skyrim in itself isn't full of tons of decisions or branching pathways to choose from, but the playstyle you choose can greatly affect how you experience this world. Whether it's a self-imposed rule such as no fast travel or no swords, or a role-playing rule like killing any wandering guard that you see, Skyrim is full of a variety of different ways to do things, making it very replayable. This show, Alternate Reality, is about playing games in a way that maybe wasn't intended for the general audience. Today, we're going to be looking at two different ways to experience the world of Skyrim. One being the survival mod, and the other skipping the main quest entirely and not becoming a Dragonborn. So let's experience this alternate reality together. I was never really one for modding my games. I played most of my games on console until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and by that time I felt like it was too late for me to start. There were so many games I hadn't played yet, and I couldn't justify replaying a game that I had just finished but playing it again with mods, and I didn't want my first experience playing a game to be a modded one. When I finally rebought Skyrim on PC a few years back, I looked at possibly modding it, but I honestly couldn't figure it out. I tried looking up tutorials on how to do it, and I just couldn't understand it and ended up messing it all up. Yes, I'm sure many of you are about to comment on how easy it is to download mods right now, but I never really had a burning desire to do it, so I just shrugged and moved on, until Bethesda announced the Skyrim Creation Club. The Skyrim Creation Club officially launched in late 2017, and was basically a way to pay for some higher tier mods. One of the biggest game-changing mods was the Survival mod, which was essentially a hardcore mode for the game, just like from Fallout New Vegas. In hardcore mode, your character must drink, sleep, and eat regularly, just like one would need to do in real life. There are other things as well, such as not being able to carry as much, ammunition having weight, and healing items and effects all working a bit slower and a little bit differently. You can't just focus on the main story of the game anymore. Survival takes precedent, making sure you have enough food and clean water and a place to sleep. Failing to do so could result in an untimely death. Now, I played New Vegas for about an hour to get the footage that you're looking at right now, and I never really felt like the game type made a huge difference that early on. Perhaps later on, you'd have to sleep more, you'd have to eat more, you'd have to drink more, but within the first hour or so, besides the stim packs taking a little longer to heal you, I hardly noticed a difference. Survival mode in Skyrim is very similar. You can be hungry, you can be tired, but you can also be cold. All clothes now have a warmth rating, and since Skyrim is mainly a winter climate, this plays a huge factor. The mod also has other major additions, such as no fast travel, no natural health regeneration, and you can't carry nearly as much. There are also new diseases added, the possibility of getting an affliction, and if you swim in freezing cold water it could possibly damage you. If you're hungry, your stamina bar will shorten and recharges slower. If you're tired, your magic bar will shorten and can even get to the point where it stops regenerating. And if you stay in cold climates for too long, it'll shorten your health bar. Not only will a mod like this extend the playing time significantly, it will also make the player a bit more cautious. Instead of hoarding tons of food and eating it all at once when you're low on health, you're going to have to be a little bit more careful about it. The fact that you can't hold as much will definitely cause a problem, as you can't just fast travel to sell things, so money will also be a little bit harder to come by. Now, there are two mods that are kind of like companion mods for survival, that being Camping and Adventurer's Backpack. Camping allows you to create a campsite that you can sleep and cook at, while the backpack allows you to carry a little bit more, and there are various types with certain benefits. However, as they make survival mode significantly easier, I didn't really want to use them. Now, I also mentioned not being a Dragonborn. This is something I tried for the first time a few years ago, and I really enjoyed the result. Obviously, every Skyrim character you play is as the last Dragonborn, but after the tutorial, if you pretty much ignore the main quest, dragons won't appear. Sure, you won't get shouts, but you won't have to worry about dragons rampaging through the mountains and trying to kill you. Now, of course, I just mentioned that we won't be doing the main quest, so we're gonna need something to do. If I just wander around aimlessly, I'm gonna be playing this forever, and I'm making this video on very limited time. I've chosen to do the Companions questline because it's the side questline that I'm least familiar with. I considered doing all the major side quests, but settled on just one because I think it's enough to get a feel for what I want to talk about. Now, naturally, I would play this game as a Khajiit because they can eat raw meat without the fear of contracting diseases, meaning I don't have to cook it. But where's the fun in that? Because of my weight limit, I'm really gonna want to be strong in conjuration, so I don't have to worry about being weighed down by all my weapons. The only two races that have a starting bonus for conjuration is the Breton and the Altmer. I chose to go with the Breton because they have some skill in speech as well, which could also help me down the road while I'm trying to sell things. I also didn't turn off the other mods, so I acquired a bunch of items from the Creation Club, but I sold them right away so I wouldn't have them as an unfair advantage. I did, however, use most of that money to buy food, so I guess I had some advantage. After I joined the Companions, my first assignment was to head off and kill some vampires. However, on the way there, I actually encountered two other vampires who proved to be fairly difficult right off the bat. I didn't have much in terms of healing items, and so I was forced to use what food I had to stay alive in the fight. Also, I'm not sure when, but at some point I got food poisoning from accidentally eating raw meat, so I assume it was probably here. This put me in a terrible situation as I still had most of my journey ahead of me, and I wasn't quite strong enough to kill a deer or animal to get some meat. Luckily for me, a wolf killed a deer shortly after, and I ran into some hunters whom I bought some food from. I then came upon Rorikstead and immediately bought as much food as possible before I left. After coming upon the vampire, I realized that I wasn't nearly strong enough after several attempts, and left to kill some Forsworn to level up. It's here that I realized the difference between being hungry and being full. I kept thinking my game was lagging or really slow, or the game was just slower than I remembered. Then I realized it was my character being hungry. Hunger not only lowers your fatigue, but it also slows down your attacks significantly, and it really makes a huge difference when you're at a low level. It was also at this point that I realized that, having not played Skyrim in quite a few years, maybe I should lower the difficulty so I don't spend the entire game dying, as the video is not titled, "Watch Ghost Boy Be Bad at Skyrim." That's another video for another day, my friends. It wasn't much later in the questline that I realized how much the limited weight was going to become a factor. There were many items I wanted to grab and sell, but I had so much damn food, and now that my arrows had weight, I had to be really careful with what I picked up and what I wanted to sell. Part of the Companion's questline is of course the ability to turn into a werewolf, and oh boy, is this going to be nice for traveling far distances. The only downside is I can't pick anything up in that form, nor can I really turn it off at will unless I just stand around and use the wait feature. Another part of the survival mod means that you can only level up after a rest, and this is exactly how it's done in the Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. For some reason, it just feels different doing it in Skyrim. I don't know if it's because I can't fast travel and so it's harder to find a bed when you need one, or if it's just because I was so used to being able to level up whenever I wanted, but in Oblivion it felt fine. Here in Skyrim it just feels weird. Now, of course, the mod isn't the only thing we've changed here. We've also completely eliminated shouts and dragons. I will admit that without the shouts, the game feels a little bit tougher. Not having the ability to, say, knock your opponents back and stun them for a bit, especially when it's a large group of them, is definitely very easy to miss. As for dragons being absent, honestly it makes the exploration feel very similar to that of Oblivion. A lot of just long, peaceful walking, occasionally finding a wild animal or bandit here and there. I wouldn't say it's definitively a better or worse experience, but it just feels different than what it normally is. You can generally go from one location to another without having to worry about a giant dragon impeding your progress and killing you. Not to mention with this mod, no way would you be able to carry most of those dragon bones. Every time I played casually and had to leave some behind, a small part of me died inside. I will say that because the main point of this video was for me to just complete the Companion's quest, I found myself totally unwilling to explore new locations that I saw on my radar. If I passed by a fort of bandits or necromancers, I would clear out the ones I saw, but I wouldn't go inside the cave. If I saw a little hut or something like that, I generally just kept walking. I didn't have the option to fast travel, so discovering the location itself means very little to me. If I wanted to go back and check it out later, I would have to walk anyways, and I didn't always have the food or energy to stop by in case it was more than just a small little hut. However, I did stop in almost every little town that I saw to go to the inn and buy food and to sleep. I don't know if I would have necessarily gone to some of these locations without the mod, so perhaps that's a positive to an otherwise negative side note. I did find myself using the carriage services a lot more. I could walk the whole distance, but sometimes it's just worth it to get a ride when you factor in food, cold, and sleep. Generally, as soon as I would show up in a new city, I would be hungry and tired, so the first thing I would do is look for a place to sleep and get warm, rather than using it as a point that was just close to another point. In that sense, it definitely adds to the realism. In no context would you ever just walk by a main city without stopping in, maybe buying food or selling equipment, or at minimum at least taking a short nap before you went on your way. Of course, traveling by carriage and sleeping in the big cities will cost you some gold. I'm not saying it's gonna bankrupt you, but it will add up after a while, so it's something to be wary of. I suppose you could go for a no carriage playthrough, but that just seems a little bit too extreme for me. I think this mod and playstyle is best for the adventurous folk who don't necessarily want to play as a chosen one or complete quests, but just explore this world that has so much to find. I think I would have far more enjoyed my experience if I wasn't on such a time crunch and only doing the Companion's quest. If I had no goal and was just playing to my heart's content, I could see myself playing this for hundreds of hours easy. I miss fast traveling quite a bit when I complete a quest because generally as soon as I'm done, I just want to hand it in and move on to the next one. If your goal is to one day finish all the quests and move on from the game and play something else, then doing this really just adds a bunch of unnecessary hours to your playthrough. However, if you're playing Skyrim for a third or fourth time because you have nothing else left to play, then this can positively add hours to your playthrough and change up your previous experiences. It really adds a level of difficulty when it comes to looting. My arrows weighed me down quite a bit, and so at multiple points I had to decide what was worth keeping and what I could just throw on the ground and get rid of. I also had to make some choices regarding the armor I was wearing and if I should just stick with the better armor rating or sacrifice some of that protection for warmth. It can definitely overcomplicate the experience, so I definitely wouldn't recommend anyone playing Skyrim for the first time to play this way, but I'd also be very interested to see what you would think of the game if you did it. Another thing you might not even consider is actually the saving of the game. Now, I'm not normally the kind of person to quick save every 12 seconds and I just rely on the autosave, but I found myself saving a lot more than I usually would. Generally, when you fast travel or enter a building, the game will autosave, but because there's no fast travel, the prompt to autosave doesn't happen nearly as much. You can be walking and exploring for a good 3 minutes in the wilderness, run into an encounter, die, and suddenly be set all the way back to the last time you exited a cave. But of course, this video is not just about the survival mod. The other thing I did in this brief playthrough was not be a Dragonborn, which is essentially just taking away the shout mechanic and also the possibility of fighting dragons. Shouts and dragon fights were two of the biggest things that Skyrim was marketed on. The ability to use this ancient form of magic to give you an advantage in a fight, and of course dragons being unscripted, meaning every fight was meant to be unique and unpredictable. Playing Skyrim without shouts doesn't make Skyrim feel like less of a game. In fact, it almost makes it feel a little bit more open. You don't have these shouts as backup to rely on, and so you have to be a bit more creative when figuring out how you're going to defeat enemies. Instead of juggling 2 or 3 different forms of combat and shouts, you're forced to just pay more attention to the weapons or magic in your hands. And of course, some shouts can come into play outside of combat. One of my personal favorite shouts was Become Ethereal, which would make the player invincible for a brief time. Trust me, there's no better way to get down a mountain quickly than to shout and just jump to the bottom. While there are many combat changes from Skyrim to Oblivion, the shouts is probably one of the biggest. There are many ways to play around with them and incorporate them into your combat routine. Taking them out just makes the combat feel like an updated Oblivion, but with dual wielding and a slightly different magic system. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. As for dragons, I gotta be honest, I don't miss them. I think that the first playthrough of Skyrim is the perfect time for the dragons to be out terrorizing the world. To be casually on your way and suddenly see a dragon flying out of the sky and heading straight towards you. It adds to this sense of urgency and suspense because it can happen at any time. You don't know how far you can walk without getting attacked. But once you've beaten the game, gotten the dragon Ren shout, I don't know, it just lost its magic for me. Maybe you disagree, and that's completely okay. In my personal opinion, the dragons became a lot like the Oblivion Gates to me. It was really cool and magical the first time, but it wasn't before long that I began to realize that they're all kinda similar. While it was possible, it wasn't likely that one battle was gonna give me a very different experience than the next. Does the survival mod plus playing not as a Dragonborn make Skyrim better? Well, I can't speak objectively and say, yes it does, or no it doesn't, but I can say that it does change the experience you have tremendously. Bethesda puts so much small details into their worlds, like putting food on plates to scattering beds and fires throughout the world at random points. The survival mode really puts these to use and forces you to go out of your way to look for them. The warmth system really makes you consider taking warmer armor over better armor, and with the limited carrying space and arrows having weight, you may not be able to take both. This, plus playing on maybe a higher difficulty than you normally would, can really form a completely different experience than just a basic vanilla run. You really get a chance to explore most of the world that maybe you wouldn't necessarily before. However, I think this mod is played best if the player isn't trying to accomplish a specific quest line. You can have your own personal goals, and I think if you set those, that works best. Most quest lines are set up in a way where you complete a quest, go back to where you got the quest from, do another quest, go back to that same place again, do another quest, and then go back to that same place again. It basically forces you to walk back and forth between the same routes, so you're not really exploring anything on your way back. I found while completing the Companion's quest line, all I wanted to do was venture off without necessarily having a thing to do, but for the sake of the video, I wanted to stick to just one thing, otherwise I'd be playing for literal days. If you played Skyrim before and you want to play it again, but you don't want to get stuck doing the exact same things you did in your previous playthroughs, then this mod might be exactly what you need to change that experience up. As for not playing as a Dragonborn, it simply takes away some options and mechanics that you have in combat, or in some cases, out of combat. Not being able to rely on these strategies to work every time forces you to change and react on the fly, maybe a little bit more. Skyrim has a very in-depth combat system, and it allows you to kinda utilize it a little bit more. And if you're like me and you're terrible at games, it'll also force you to autosave a little bit more. I'm not sure playing without dragons would be any fun without the survival mod, however. It would probably just feel like playing Skyrim and then skipping the main quest, which a lot of people do anyways. I think it's this combination specifically that really gives you the experience of just being another person in this large world. And as I said, I'm not sure completing a large quest line like the main quest would be as interesting with the survival mod, because there's so much walking back and forth to the same locations. Perhaps you disagree with me and you don't really feel like either of these variations are worth it. Maybe they don't really add to the experience, or maybe they don't really change the experience, and that's totally fine. I would love to know if you guys have any self-imposed rules or challenges you play with, or even mods that you guys use to further your Skyrim experience. As I said earlier, I have extremely limited knowledge of modding, and I haven't really done it outside of the Creation Club, but I know there's thousands of things out there, and I'd love to know what you guys consider to be the best. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It really means a lot to me. I haven't uploaded kind of consistently, but it's really cool to see the channel growing. This is a little bit different than what we normally do, but this is the last of the new shows for a little bit. And there will be some more other alternate reality episodes, whatnot, coming in the future. If you are just curious about updates on the channel, what I'm up to, that kind of thing, you can follow me on Twitter at ghostboy259. If you're just interested in like channel updates, at Reality Escape YT, those links are down in the description. I've also got a gaming channel called JaffuDub. We haven't really updated it in a while, but we'll be hitting it pretty hard in the new year. So if you're interested in just hanging out with me a little bit more and watching me play games, there is some stuff already uploaded on JaffuDub, link in the description as well. As I said in my last update video, things are going to be a little spotty and not as consistent with uploading, but I am going to try to make sure I don't disappear completely. And just a big thanks to anyone who didn't see, I did get monetized recently, and I've just been overwhelmed by all the lovely things you guys have had to say as you support me and continue to help the channel grow. It's been a crazy 8.5 months, and I hope that I can continue to do this for you guys. So thank you very much for standing by as I try to grow my name and my brand, and I hope I will see you in the next one. Have a good one, guys.